You're listening to the Uprev Ninja Podcast, episode number 37, with your host, Tom Hudson.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Uprev Ninja Podcast. If this is your first time listening, thanks for joining us. This show is produced each week with the single intent of discovering the tips, tricks, hacks, and lessons learned from our guests that has catapulted them into living the best version of themselves. Join your host, Tom Hudson, as he continues his search for the best methods to uprev his life. Now, let's dive into the show.
Today on the Uprev Ninja Podcast, I'm interviewing Ainsley Micallef. Ainsley is a rut to reinvention mentor for over 35s. By combining NLP, psychology, and law of attraction principles, she drags you kicking and screaming out of your comfort zone and into a life that you had only dreamt about before. She's been a tour guide in Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, a dating coach for men, a teacher, life coach, corporate robot, NLP therapist, and entrepreneur with more big, ridiculous dreams to come. Always an adventurous, free spirit, she skydived, cage dived with sharks, slept in tents next to lions, patted cheetahs, been lunged at by a crocodile, chased tornadoes, and lived in a tent for a total of 3 years in bush, jungle, desert, and everything in between. Not only that, she's taught people just like you how to embody the mindset to do these things and a whole lot more for 11 years. Her mission is to show you that your life and the things that you do in it can be limitless and extraordinary. Hey, welcome to the Uprev Ninja Podcast. Today I've got Ainsley Micallef with me. How you doing, Ainsley?
I'm great, thanks, Tom. How are you?
I am excited. Your bio is... it's awesome. I mean, I could just post that and just say, there, go learn. And it's funny. My wife actually just got back from Africa, her and my stepdaughter, and they were over there for 10 days, and they went to an all-girls school in Moragora, just, west of Dar. And,
yep.
It was a life-changing experience, I think, for both of them. But, travel's a big thing. But regardless, I don't want to, tell my own story here. This is about you, Ainsley. So why don't you tell us who you are and tell us how you got to where you are today?
Wow. Okay. That is such a big question because I've done...
I know.
Yeah. Well, basically, I'll go back to my story of how I came to do what I do. And back in 2007, so I've traveled the world. I spent most of my 20s traveling, living all around Australia. I lived in London for a while. I worked as a tour guide in Africa, worked as a tour guide all over Australia. I was a different type of person and never really knew where I fit. And so I thought, okay, I am 27 years old. It's time to, I was a bit older then, 29. It's time to settle down, get a good job, good corporate job, and, get on to the next stage of my life. And I ended up becoming a train wreck and fell down massive rabbit holes of drugs and partying all weekend, drinking a lot. And, I think it was just to mask who I was because I just felt like I was square peg in a round hole. I'd come from this kind of life where I was so nomadic and always traveling and having a great time to then trying to fit myself into a box. And as a result of that, I was just, I just reacted in that way because it wasn't that I couldn't cope. I had a good job and all of that, but there was just a bit of an identity crisis going on there. And so my friend introduced me to neuro-linguistic programming, and I went to a seminar and I was really blown away by it, by how people can change their perception and their minds in a second, in a short space of time, just by shifting their perspective. And so that started a new career of entrepreneurship where my first business was date coaching men. And I think, there was a part of me that wanted to heal myself in that regard, and I felt that was my outlet to do it in. And so I used to take guys out to bars and not restaurants, but to bars, and I'd take them shopping and do a lot of coaching with them on their self-esteem and their own personal identity and being able to meet the woman of their dreams. But then I studied training and I started going a bit crazy and doing all sorts of different courses and running courses and workshops for people on communication and relating. and mindset. And yeah, I mean, that's been my journey from then to this point. And so now with what I do, it's incorporating all of that. So all of my struggles, all of my hardships, all of my wins, even, you know, you've got to count those in, the successes, and then the obstacles that I faced. I got to a point where now, or not even now, a year ago, because I'd been through a couple of different businesses and different ways of doing things, and I thought, what is it? Like, what is it that I really want to do that I can help people and use all of my experience of travel, you know, losing myself, finding myself. How can I do that, all of it, into a business? And so that's when Adventure Fest was born. And at the time I was in Central America house sitting. One of my dreams was to house sit luxury homes in Central America. And so I was off there doing that. And, you know, over this last 12 months has been really an evolution of me finding my own identity and then figuring out, okay, well, how can I apply this to other people? And so what I do in this business is help people out of ruts, because a lot of people are. And, you know, it can be an emotional rut like depression or really coping, like struggling with themselves. It could be a career or business rut. It's just one of those areas of people's lives where they just are spinning their wheels and they're super, super stuck. And so my job is to help them create a compelling future, because quite often when people are stuck, they've either A, got no future and they don't know where they're headed, and that's why they're stuck, or they know what they want, but there's just a few mental, emotional, and energetic blocks that are stopping them from moving forward. And so my job is to so I go for two different types of people. They're either in the rut, really stuck, and they don't know what they want, or they do know what they want, and I lead them towards starting their own business, finding their own purpose, so that they can have that freedom lifestyle that I'd created for myself numerous times. And so that's brought me to this point now. Yeah.
Well, no, I think that's great that you've been able to use the transformation that you went through, and, you know, you can leverage that, because some people will definitely say, well, you've always been this happy, get lucky, and you've always had everything. Listen to you, you get to travel the world. You've always had this. And when you get to share your story with them, they're like, oh, you know, and it gives them, you know, just not a positive outlook, but it also gives them, you know, maybe the courage, or, you know, it gives them a lot of positiveness if they can break through the negativity that they're currently living in.
Yeah.
So Ainsley,
definitely.
So, you know, kind of looking back on your life, and, you know, you going back through this, you know, drug and alcoholism, and the, you know, just, you know, partying, and, you know, just not being in a good place, you know, going from that to where you are today, has there continued to be, you know, some of these fear, embarrassment, anything like that, you know, the feeling of inadequacy that has, you know, kind of prevented you from moving forward? Not necessarily prevented you, but, you know, that negative self-talk that you have. Do you still have stuff like that?
Not so much anymore, because I know how to manage it. It's not so much that I've gotten rid of it. Like, I don't think you can say you ever get rid of it, because with personal growth comes self-doubt. Right. You can't have one without the other, because there's the fear comes up of like, oh my God, like I need to expand into, let's say, for like, just to make it a clear metaphor, expand from the $1,000 mindset to the $10,000 mindset to the $100,000 to the $1 million mindset. And so there's these different stages of growth, no matter what it is, in relationships or with yourself or with your career or business or financially or whatever. You do have periods of self-doubt of like, can I do this? But it gets a lot easier as you push through the next level and push through the next level. And so I think, you know, a lot of people, once they get that helping hand up from feeling like they're completely alone and completely stuck, then it gets a lot easier, because they've got the tools to handle it now. They've got the daily rituals. They've got the that they know what they need to do to get to that next level, and they know that when they slip backwards a bit, that it's a lot easier to get back out of it.
Yeah, it's like the volume gets turned down on those inner voices. I've been there, and I've done NLP myself, so and it really was like a light switch. It was pretty phenomenal. So
mind blowing, isn't it?
It really is, yeah. So
yeah.
Well, so going through this journey, what are you, what kind of tips and tricks do you offer your clients? So, like, let's say I reach out to you today and like, hey, I really need to go on this trip. You accept me as a client. I'm not 100% sure what the process is, but let's just say, you accept me as a client, but it's 2 months away. Well, what can I work on right now? What kind of tips and tricks I'm not looking for a silver bullet, but, what could you help me right now with? Like, what would you recommend?
The first thing you've got to do, like and this isn't mine, so I can't promote it as my own tool, but is I get my clients to write their liar and fraud story. And so you start with, I'm a liar and a fraud, and then you talk about why, because I am very much about personal accountability. And that was the biggest takeaway I got from doing the NLP was, oh my God, I am in control of everything that happens to me. And if I can't control it, like, if something falls out of the sky onto my head,
right.
It's how I deal with it afterwards. And we have control over that. And so the first thing the liar and fraud story does is it allows them to take ownership for the choices that they're making. And it also allows them to really admit that they're just, I don't know, can I swear on here?
Yeah, totally.
They've been bullshitting themselves about what they're not doing to improve their lives. Like, for example, I had a client this morning, and she's a singer, and she's incredible. She's sung in lots of blues bars. She went to Chicago and sung. She's great, but she has a lot of self-doubt. And so I got her to write the liar and fraud story, and she just cracked up laughing because she just realised how much she'd been deciding not to decide to actually take action because of this big wall of excuses and reasons. And so you've just got to own it. Like, you've really got to own, if you're not exercising, own the fact that you are just not exercising. You don't need a raft of excuses of time and whatever. Just own that you haven't gone out for a run. You haven't done it. It's as simple as that. If you're eating crap food, it's because you're not disciplining yourself. It's not because of any other reason, but, and so we go, okay, first of all, you have to admit it to yourself, what you're doing wrong. The next step is getting really clear about what you want. So what are you going to replace it with? What's the desired outcome? Because most of my clients come to me because they're still looking backwards. They're stuck because they're focusing on what they don't want as opposed to what they do want. And when you focus on what you do want, then it will happen. It starts to happen. When you focus on what you don't want, that happens too. So your brain can't differentiate between negative and positive. It just takes the information in. It's like your body with food. It doesn't know whether it's a positive or negative food. It just absorbs it the way it's meant to absorb it. And so there's no kind of emotion around it. We're the ones that add the emotion to it.
Yeah.
And so, sorry, go.
No, go ahead, Ainsley. It's all right.
And so while they're consistently focusing on things that make them feel like crap, then, they just continuously create that. And so that's where it comes from. It's just owning that and then having clarity around what they want. And then we use my 6-step Adventure Fest method to move forward so that they can make that happen.
Yeah, no, and I agree with everything you said. I mean, there's so many, negative stories that are not helping us that we have on, repeat going through our minds, and those just get entrenched over time, and the whole neuroplasticity, for you to start thinking outside of that, it is difficult, but does happen. And, that can be, other things, your environment, the people you surround yourself with, all of those things can influence that. So,
Yep.
yeah. And, I've had a lot of those stories in the past. So I completely agree that that's a great place to start. So, this Adventure Fest thing, definitely is pushing people out of their comfort zone. And,
Yes.
you've traveled all over. You lived in a tent, I think it was for 3 years. So it sounds like you do this too. But, what do you do, now to kind of push yourself out of your comfort zone and to make sure you're not getting your life on cruise control?
And that's the thing. Like, I've just come back to my hometown to really focus on my business, because while I was house sitting, I was moving around too much, and I was still working, but it wasn't working as well as I wanted it to. And so I thought, you know what, I need stability. I need my head to be stable so that my business can be stable and things start working for me. And so it's true. Like, admittedly now I'm definitely not cruising along. My comfort zone stuff is more mental at the moment, rather than going out and jumping out of planes and that sort of thing.
Right.
It's more stretching my thinking every day. It's doing personal development every single day, study, and then applying it. Pushing one of my biggest blocks for a long time was selling. And so, now I can sell really beautifully, where it's a nice, it's just a nice flow of conversation, rather than buy my shit or anything like that. Because I had a lot of fear around that. So I've learned a lot more now to become softer about things, and doing the hustle in a way that's nicer, and it's a nice flow, and people want to work with you. They want your help. And so that was something that I really had to push myself out of my comfort zone with more than anything. Like, a lot of the travel stuff, it's just something I do. It's not even, it's just a no-brainer to me. To a lot of people, it's scary as anything. But yeah, a lot of the mental stuff, so entrepreneurship, business, and my own personal development has been where I've really been pushing myself a lot, and will continue to. Yeah,
I think, the traveling piece, you do it enough, and at first you're getting like exponential growth out of it. You're learning so much, but at some point it does get, the diminishing returns. So you do have to find other avenues. And you mentioned the selling process. This actually came up on a recent podcast, and the person felt that being a salesman was slimy, because that was the what they grew up with, or just that was the definition in their head. So anytime they tried to do that, they had that was the persona and the energy that they were putting into it when they spoke with other folks.
100%.
And it's pretty amazing, isn't it? Like, we have all these programs running in our mind that we don't even know are running sometimes. No. So it's kind of frightening, to be honest with you. So, like,
well, it's I think, and that's the thing. It's just and it's evolved a lot in that way, because it's a form of we're persuading each other. We're either persuading or manipulating every single day.
Right.
And I used to think persuasion was trickery, but that's manipulation to me. I'm back in my date coaching days. I was studying pickup artists. I was reading a lot of these guys' stuff and watching their videos and learning how they hypnotize women into sleeping with them. And I actually took myself to LA to meet a pickup artist, and he hypnotized me. Lucky for me, I knew what was going on, and I was able to snap myself out of it. But it's just a really interesting thing to go into, and that stuff gives it such a bad name. And being able to do what I did back then with helping guys, I was able to take the light off that tacky stuff and onto something with a little bit more heart and soul. And it's the same with selling. It's like you can be really if I don't feel someone's right to work with me, then I tell them, like, here's some advice. Go and see this person. They'll be able to help you better. So it's not about making the sale. It's about who can I benefit the most?
Right.
Who is going to listen to me and do what they need to do? And, that takes us off track a little bit of from the original topic, but it's a metaphor for life in general. Like, and, I teach a lot about energy. Like, if you're pushing too hard to get a result on something, or manipulate it to to succumb to you, eventually it will start to resent you, or you'll push it away.
Right.
And that's whether it's money or people or anything except dogs.
Well, you and I probably could do a whole other episode on date coaching, because I lived in that world as well. And
did you? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what's interesting is I've had, I think, 2 or 3 other date coaches on here, and it was just a part of their journey. But yeah, like when I first got involved in that world, it was definitely about manipulation. And when you have low self-esteem, and I did at that point in my life, I was like, ooh, this works. However,
power.
Yeah, so it gives you a lot of power, but it wasn't congruent with who I was. I wasn't living authentically, so I felt in almost like a negative spiral, going downwards. And the people that I started to attract in my life, not just the women, but just people in general, were low self-esteem. So you start getting low quality individuals. But then that's
exactly right.
Yeah, absolutely. But when you can flip that script and say, hey, I'm not going to use manipulation, and it's no longer about, hey, I want that woman. I want to become this man, or, this individual that other people will want. And it becomes less about the other person and about you, and you start this journey. And I got to be honest with you. I mean, 9 years ago or 10 years ago when I started this, that's where I got started at. It was through date coaching. And that's where, and look where I'm at today. In regards to, that's not what I'm teaching. It's all about introspective work and, working on yourself. And then all that other stuff will come into your life.
And you can either be the chaser or the magnet.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you're the chaser, you always lose. The magnet wins.
Yep, I agree.
Where you become this person that people will come to you. And I always say that one of my favorite analogies is that you have to be having the party before anyone else arrives. So, in other words, say, for example, if you're sitting on your couch, you're watching TV, you're in your pajamas, and all your friends arrive for your party, then it's going to be a pretty shit party.
Right.
Whereas you get up and you get the music pumping, the lights are going, you got the food ready, you're creating the environment for people to want to come in and stay.
Right.
And that's for everything, whether it's dating, whether it's business, whether it's finding the right job for you. You have to be having the party before anyone else will be even interested in coming.
I completely agree. And that's all inside of you. And like you said, with NLP and other tools and processes and adventures, you can become that person. And it at first, it seems daunting and like, that can never happen to me. It's just because that's the place that you're at in your life. Well, Ainsley, I think this is, I'm loving where this is going. And I'm curious what kind of habits that you have in your life today to, keep you on track to, have this continual growth.
So every day, first thing I do is get up and I read a book. Or not a whole book.
I was wow.
Yeah, no. Some do. I don't know how they find the time and still have millions of dollars. But what I do is I read and then I journal around what I've read to put it into context in my own life. Because I'm a teacher, like a trainer by trade. And so, like, I used to do a lot of accredited training and, soft skills training as well. And the best way to get someone to ingrain or integrate a habit into themselves is by putting it into context in their own life. And I think this is where school falls down. I'm generalizing here, of course, but you know, it's like, okay, I've read this thing on, let's say, confirmation bias, for example, which I talk about a lot in my stuff. Okay, so I've studied about confirmation bias, which is basically we have beliefs and then we seek out, because we can only pay attention to a small amount of things around us. So with confirmation bias, it helps us select things. So we have beliefs and then we seek out things to validate that belief.
Correct.
So say, for example, I read something like that. I'm like, okay, interesting. And then I will journal and say, well, what am I using? What confirmation bias do I have that's affecting my life? And so then I will journal around it and go, okay, well, how can I flip that? And so that's the first thing I do. Then I do 10 things I'm grateful for. I do that morning and night. And then I've just started doing, this is something that James Altucher does. He does 10 ideas a day.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. Have you heard of that?
I have. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've started doing that. It was actually his wife that wrote the book. So I read her book and on it. And then I just wrote out a list of topics so that in the morning I don't have to sit there and go, oh, what am I going to write? I've got the topics there. And then I just sit there and write. Like today it was how can I make $10,000 in 7 days? And so I wrote out 10 ways to make $10,000 in 7 days.
Wow.
And, the other day it was how can I get more passive income? And so, and it's all sorts of things, like how can I show my mum, 10 ways to show my mum I love her, 10 ways to show dad I love him, 10, so every day is a different thing. And, you're not going to do those all like that day or anything like that, but you go back and you go, okay. And it just helps you get ideas. It helps you solve problems.
Well,
it just keeps those juices flowing.
Right. And I think it does show you all of the opportunity that we have. And I actually do have a friend that I forgot about this, but I've got a friend that does this 10 ideas a day. And when he first started, he was like, it was taking him forever to come up with two or three. And then by the end of the week, he was like, this is the most exhilarating exercise. I look forward to waking up to do it. And in regards to the journaling after reading, so on the show, one of the things I do is, I do the intro and then the interview, but I always conclude the interview. I'll do a separate recording and I'll take away the 2 or 3 key things that I learn, because I think a couple of things. One, we consume so much, but we never go back and reflect.
That's right.
So that's how I'm reflecting. And then for the audience, I want to see what they, what did you take away from this? Because you could say something that I completely missed. And by, writing that down, like, hey, these were my key takeaways, then I can have that discussion with myself, like, ooh, what of these do I want to implement in my life? And, again, it's that, I'm failing at this part of my life, or I'm not succeeding, or, whatever word or I want to use, hey, there's a tip right here, and that's going to get me to the next level. So, I love those exercises. So, thank you for sharing those, Ainsley. So,
and I just think I'll just quickly add to that. So with that, because that is the best way to learn, like studying something and reading it over and over again isn't an effective way to learn something. It's when you apply it somehow into your own life or think about it in a way that it relates to you. So, and that's the part of it. Like, people say I read 10,000 books a year or whatever. That's probably physically impossible. But you know what I mean? And I think, how are you retaining the information? I've got 10 books on the go. And so depending on how I'm feeling first thing in the morning when I wake up, which is pretty neutral, but it's like, okay, what do I want to achieve today? Let's read this book and then do something about it. And so it kind of leads me. And like, sometimes it might not be a journal. It might just be a blog post.
Right.
Or okay, I'm going to make a video about that. Or, so it gets me into that frame of mind of, okay, what's the next step now? And it just becomes this natural flow through the day where I'm just not reacting, but I'm getting the ideas to get to the next step.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think, Elon Musk, I read somewhere recently that he reads, I think on average, 2 books a day, and the guy works like 80-hour weeks. So
I know.
I assume he's got, 3 companies, and I just assume he has some kind of time machine, and the guy doesn't sleep. Because I consider myself like a time management guru. I feel like I've got that part of my life on lockdown, and I can't do that. So well,
I know it. Yeah, it's crazy.
It really is. Yeah, unless it's Dr. Seuss books, I might be able to do it. But so, what part of your life do you feel that you're kind of working on right now? You kind of touched on this a bit earlier, Ainsley, but we're always trying to get better at different facets of our life. What is it that you're currently working on in your life to try to get to the next level?
So, my big picture goal is I want my own elephant orangutan sanctuary in Southeast Asia.
Oh, cool.
Like a luxury eco resort attached to it, because that will fund the rescues. And so everything I do between now and then, it's a working backwards. And so working back from that is my tour company. And so at the moment I'm just working on just every day, getting my name out as much as possible, so that, I've got the mentoring business now, then it'll be the tours of my own. Then I'll start selling the itinerary to coaches and PTs and yoga teachers to take their own people on my tours. And so it's just going to be this natural progression. So it's just doing as much as I can to spread the word, run workshops. It's all work related, personal. Well, actually, no, it's not necessarily. I've put out to the universe that I'm ready for another relationship, so that's good. That's going to happen. So I don't need to do anything with that anymore.
Right.
Friendship groups, that was something that when I first moved back home, I haven't been here for 7 years, and even then, I've always flitted in and out. And I was like, where do I fit? My friends are all married with kids and I'm single and no kids. And, so they're busy doing stuff. So I need to find my tribe. And so I've started really building that here. So, yeah, I guess it's lots of things in different areas. But my core focus is, getting this business on a trajectory so that I can hire someone to do the stuff I don't want to do. And,
and focus on what truly brings you joy. I get that. Well, so I know we've covered, a lot in the last half hour, and, some of this, the audience is probably like, ooh, I wish they would have done a deep dive into some of these sections here. Going back to, a number of years ago when, and I've mentioned this already one other time, but, the lifestyle that you were leading was not, conducive, and it wasn't a good direction for you or really for anyone. Let's say someone out there is listening to this podcast today and they're where you were at that point in your life. Where would you tell them to get started? They just need, they're like, ooh, can I get out of this downward spiral I'm in? What would you give them for advice?
Brainstorm a list of everything you want, and then write it out as if it's your perfect day.
That's easy enough.
That's the best way. Because, people are limited in their thinking of I could never live in Mexico, or I could never tour guide in Africa or anything like that. And that's bullshit. There are jobs, and there are planes to Mexico. So there's nothing stopping you other than your own head. But, getting clear about where you're headed is going to help you work backwards.
Right.
And also, what you're doing is subconsciously telling your brain that this is what's happening. And so then you become more finely tuned to opportunities, you get more ideas, you get more insights, you start seeing things relevant to what your end goal is. So, for example, when I decided to do the elephant sanctuary, I started seeing elephants everywhere. And it's not because of some magic. It's because I trained my confirmation bias to look for things relevant to that.
Correct.
And so that's what I teach. Like, people go, the hippy dippy woo woo stuff, but it's more about, let's train your brain to start seeing these things instead of focusing on the crappy stuff that's keeping you where you are.
Yeah, and it really is amazing when, I mean, your brain wants to seek out and prove that you're correct. So you start saying these things, and you especially, you write it down, that stuff really does start to manifest. And it's not woo-woo, because it is happening. No. You're not seeing it because it's not a part of your reality yet.
Yeah, that's right. And it's, because you haven't decided to create it. And so, people hold themselves back because they don't think it's possible because of conditioning and whatever other reason. And, once you get excited about what's possible, even if you've still got a bit of doubt, at least you've written it down. Gone, okay, what's my perfect day? Do it in detail. I wake up, sun's beaming into the bedroom, curtains are gently flapping in the sea breeze. Make it a story. I wake up and his arms are around me, or hers, depending on your preference. So when you do that, you create the emotion. Like when you read a book, it'd be a really shit book if it was like, Jack and Jill decided to go on a picnic and then they had a swim and then they came home.
Right. Where's the hero's journey in that?
Yeah. And then you go, Jack and Jill, they pack this huge basket full of breadsticks and, bruschetta and, like French wine and, like details give shape. And when you give details to your ideal future, it gives it shape and it allows you to visualize it. And when you visualize it, again, you're telling your brain, this is what's happening, this is what's going on. Your brain will like, that's how I got all the tour guiding jobs.
Yeah.
It was because I went, I want to do that. And it led me to doing that. Like my last relationship, I declared that I was ready for a relationship. I wrote down what I wanted, someone that loved travel. And I met someone, and within 3 weeks, he'd swept me off to Europe. So how that ended is another story.
But that stuff happens.
But didn't use the power of visualization for the next part. But
right.
now I've learned. Yeah. So
it's an exercise my wife and I did before we got married. Each of us went off and we wrote off. We wrote what our life was going to be 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 50 year down the road. Yeah. And we did that separately. And then we, so first off, we're already kind of visualizing it to write the story. And then we came together and shared our stories together to find out, okay, you're completely going in a direction I don't want to go, or, whoa, that is really exciting. So it gave us an opportunity to see if there were any gaps and if there were concerns that we needed to address, obviously, before we got married. But it also, now we have this joint story. That's what we did after that exercise. We sat down together to write that joint story. And it truly is starting to manifest because we see those opportunities. And,
love that.
It's been a fantastic journey so far. Well, Ainsley, so is there anything that you're, just kind of, I guess, wrapping up, is there anything that you're currently working on, or, a book, or, the business that you have, anything like that you want to kind of talk about and share with the audience?
Well, next year I'll be running tours. So I've got my 21-day Yucatan Slam and Jungle Rumble, which is 21 days in Mexico and Guatemala. And I haven't set a date yet, but if you go to my website and click on ainsleym.com and click on tours, you will be able to put your email address in to get a brochure. Don't worry, I won't spam you with all sorts of other stuff. But you can get a brochure to have a read about that, and at least then you'll be ready for the announcement for that date. So it'll be around June, July next year.
Okay, no, that sounds fantastic. Well, is there anything that we haven't touched on or covered that you would be remiss if we didn't discuss?
God, I could go on all day.
No, don't worry, I could too. And there's so many different rabbit holes I could have went down, but
I know.
Like, it's all right. There's many more shows that are going to be recorded. So
definitely. No, I'm all right. I think I've shared some good stuff, and I hope that's helped people. And I guess my message to everyone listening is that you aren't alone. So stop thinking you are.
Yeah.
There's like, obviously, if someone's listening to this podcast, they want something more for themselves.
Right.
And so keep going with that, and educate yourself, but don't overwhelm yourself as well. Just make sure that everything you do is in line with what you want as your goal, as your ideal perfect day. And it's funny, like with the perfect day exercise, the first time I ever did it, I wrote, I live on the beach. I was living in Brisbane, which is like coastal Australia, beautiful, perfect weather all the time. And I wanted to live on the Gold Coast, which is kind of like, I guess, Miami.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, my brother got a job in down south. And so he moved out of the house that he was living in, and I was able to move in. And I was like, oh my God, 2 weeks ago, I wrote out my perfect day, and that was this. And here I am. That's
awesome.
You know, and so every time I write out my perfect day, it seems like I go, geez, I need to go bigger here.
Right. Yeah. I need to write a little bit more detail.
Yeah, exactly. So, because it just happens every time I write it, like my house sitting luxury homes, my ex and I were going to do it, and then we didn't. Then we broke up, and then a year later I was like, screw it, I'm selling up and I'm going to go. And so I did it. And so when you decide you want to do something, you'll be amazed. And when you get clear about it with the details, you'll be amazed, because you'll be off doing it in no time.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your journey with us, and all the the tips, and kind of just how you live your life now, and how it's where it's taken you. I think there's so much gold in this, and I think when people go and read the show notes and read your bio and check out your business, they're going to be floored, and they're going to ask me probably to have you back on, because like you said, there's so many rabbit holes we could go in, and that's the fantastic thing, though. We get a good primer of who is Ainsley. So
yes.
This is great, though, and there's so many good takeaways. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Tom.
In this episode that she gives us, the first was the story that she briefly talks about, the I'm a liar and a fraud story. I think it's really good that, these, I've talked about this on the show in the past, but we have a lot of these stories that we just tell ourselves that are not self-serving and that are very negative. So it's good to go through that and understand what stories and negative loops that you're in that you can work on. The other item is, don't overconsume. This is huge, and that's actually one of the reasons I do the summary and do the show notes, to help you. We can sit there and listen to 20 podcasts a day or whatever, but if you're not taking action and integrating some of that, then you're not really up-revving, your life as much as you could. So, every time I listen to a podcast, I really do my best to what was the key thing I took away, 1, 2, or 3 things. And that's not just for this podcast, but many podcasts. I really try to go through what I learned, and then how can I integrate that or implement that in my life. And the other thing is, even if I can't implement it, or it's something that just I'm already doing, or if it's just incremental, and it makes me better. What's awesome is when I have these conversations with my guest or family and friends, I will have learned those things because I sat down and really noodled over, hey, these are 3 things I really took away and I really liked, and it changed this person's life. And that helps me to pass those things on to people in my life that I care about. So I really enjoyed those things. The other item that she talked about was, she wakes up and she reads, she journals about what she just read. She puts it in her own words. That's a really good way of integrating those things. And she also writes around 10 things that she's grateful for. And then in the evening, Ainsley, she also writes down 10 more things that she's been, grateful for. And to ensure she's creating that innovative spark, that energy 10 ideas. And I think she says she got this from James Altucher or maybe his wife. But, 10 ideas really do. And that's hard. I've tried that before. And I mean, it does get easier. I'm not going to lie. I don't do that practice. But, I really liked it. And it's something I think I'm going to, get back into doing. So those were my key takeaways. What did you take away from the show?
Thanks for listening to the UpRev Ninja podcast with your host, Tom Hudson. Navigate to our website at uprev.ninja today, where you will find additional resources to help you discover the best version of you. While you're there, join our newsletter and join the discussion on your favorite social media platforms. We've got some awesome guests lined up to share with us how they are becoming the best versions of themselves. Again, thank you for listening. Now it's time to go out and uprev your life.